in the quiet, palm-lined community of Willow Springs. Nestled just outside of Sacramento, California, lived Nathan Carter and his older sister, Amelia Carter, a woman whose calm demeanor and electric wheelchair often made people underestimate her. Most of the neighbors knew Amelia as a polite, intelligent woman recovering from a car accident. What they didn't know was that she also happened to be the Governor of California. But to Patricia Lang, the iron-fisted HOA president of Willow Springs, none of that mattered. With her pearl earrings, flawless French manicure, and an obsessive dedication to community standards, Patricia had waged a personal vendetta against the Carter siblings for months. Her latest target? A wheelchair access ramp installed at the Carter home, a ramp built with proper permits, matching paint, and full ADA compliance. Still, Patricia saw it as an unauthorized modification, and in her latest violation notice she issued a final warning: remove the ramp or face HOA-sanctioned demolition. Nathan had ignored plenty of her petty letters. But when he saw two men in suits and a bulldozer parked across the street one morning, it hit him. This wasn't just a power trip. This was war, and Patricia had no idea who she had just picked a fight with. Nathan Carter's heart pounded as he stood in his front yard, watching the bulldozer idle in his driveway like a sleeping beast. Across the lawn, Patricia Lang, Willow Springs' impeccably dressed HOA president, clutched a clipboard to her chest like it was a badge of honor. "Mr. Carter," she called out, her smile as tight as her blonde bun. "I assume you received the notice. The board voted unanimously. This structure is in violation of Section 9.3b, unauthorized exterior alterations." Nathan took a step forward, holding up a manila folder filled with permits, stamped approvals from the city, and even a color-matching report. "We followed every rule, Patricia. Permits, materials, even the HOA's design guidelines. You just don't like that it's for a wheelchair." Her smile widened, falsely. "It's about aesthetics and uniformity, not accessibility. That ramp lowers property values." Behind Nathan, the metal ramp gleamed in the morning sun. It had taken weeks to install. It was the only way his sister Amelia could safely enter her home after the accident, and now it was about to be torn down. Nathan's phone buzzed in his pocket. He glanced down. A message from Amelia's assistant: "Governor in session until 1 p.m. Phone's off. Emergency only via security line." He was on his own for now. As the bulldozer operator climbed into the cab, Patricia clapped her hands. "We have board approval and notice was served. You're welcome to file a dispute after removal." "I already did," Nathan said, his voice rising. "You're violating federal accessibility laws. This is a ramp for a disabled resident. You don't have the authority." "I am the authority," Patricia snapped. The bulldozer roared to life. Nathan stepped in front of it, planting himself on the edge of the ramp. "Move," she hissed, "or I'll call the sheriff." "Go ahead," Nathan said, pulling out his phone. "But you might want to call someone higher up, because you're about to bulldoze a state-owned asset." Patricia blinked. "What?" "This ramp," he said, loud enough for neighbors to hear as they began peeking through windows, "was paid for by a state-funded accessibility grant, because my sister isn't just a resident here. She's the Governor of California." The bulldozer's engine sputtered as the operator froze. Patricia's gaze went from smug to pale in seconds. "You're bluffing," she said. Nathan pulled up a scanned copy of the grant approval and city permit on his phone. "This is state-registered infrastructure on private property. You demolish this. You're not just breaking HOA rules. You're facing a federal lawsuit." Still, Patricia wasn't backing down. She turned to the operator. "Proceed." The man hesitated. "Ma'am, this looks serious." That was when Nathan tapped the live stream button. "I'm broadcasting this right now. You'll be famous by noon." Patricia looked around. More neighbors had stepped outside. One man was already recording. Suddenly, the quiet streets of Willow Springs weren't so quiet anymore. The roar of the bulldozer's engines still hung in the air, but the machine hadn't moved. The operator stared between Nathan Carter, still standing on the edge of the ramp, and Patricia Lang, now visibly rattled by the mention of Governor. "I'm not risking my job for a ramp," the operator muttered under his breath, climbing down from the cab. Patricia spun on him. "We contracted your company. You're under instruction." "No," he cut her off, holding up his phone. "We've just been advised to stand down. My boss says there's a state flag on this project now. You didn't mention that." Patricia turned scarlet. Her mouth opened, then closed. Nathan exhaled, just as he noticed something else. Several neighbors had stepped outside with phones raised, recording from porches and driveways. Across the street, Mrs. Patel, a retired teacher, shouted, "You're really going to destroy a disabled woman's access ramp?" That was the match. Dozens of voices erupted at once. "She fined me for wind chimes. She called code enforcement on my bird feeder. She made my son take down his playset. This has gone too far." Patricia's calm snapped. "This isn't a mob. I'm enforcing community standards." Nathan took a breath and stepped forward, holding up his phone. "Let's make sure we're all clear. This HOA action was initiated by Mrs. Lang without notifying the full board, despite city approval and ADA protections. And the target of this demolition is not just a resident. She's the governor of California." Gasps rippled through the crowd, and then came the sirens. 3 black SUVs turned onto the street, followed by 2 marked California Highway Patrol units. The lead vehicle parked across the driveway. Out stepped Amelia Carter, flanked by her state security team, her expression unreadable, beneath dark sunglasses and a navy blue blazer. The neighborhood fell completely silent. Amelia rolled forward. "Mrs. Lang," she said smoothly, "I was hoping this was a misunderstanding. But judging by the bulldozer and the demolished concrete, I see it's not." Patricia froze. "Governor, Spare me the excuse," Amelia said coldly. "This ramp was built under a state-funded accessibility grant and approved by city ordinance. Your decision to demolish it violates multiple statutes, including Title II of the ADA." Patricia's hands trembled. I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Amelia replied. "You assumed you had the right to override federal law with your HOA bylaws." She turned to her team. "Secure the site. Document everything." One security officer pulled out a drone. Another began photographing the bulldozer and debris. A third handed Patricia a packet of legal documents. "You're being placed under formal investigation for disability discrimination, unlawful destruction of accessible infrastructure, and potential abuse of HOA authority," the officer said calmly. Patricia's knees buckled. Nathan caught Amelia's eye. You didn't have to come this fast. She smiled faintly. I left budget negotiations for this, but I'd leave Congress if someone threatened my ramp. And just like that, what started as a petty HOA squabble had become a statewide scandal. In the days that followed, Willow Springs became the center of a media storm. News helicopters circled overhead. Reporters crowded the sidewalks. Viral footage of Patricia Lang being handed a legal notice by Governor Amelia Carter's security team made national headlines. But the real transformation was happening quietly, house by house, and it started with Nathan Carter. He had never seen himself as a leader. He was just the younger brother, the one who managed groceries, adjusted appointments, and fixed things around the house. But when the ramp crumbled under Patricia's bulldozer and the community watched it live, everything shifted. Suddenly, neighbors who had once only waved politely began knocking on his door. Mrs. Patel dropped off a tray of chai and whispered, "She find me one hunt for hanging prayer flags." Mr. Chen brought blueprints from the playset Patricia forced him to dismantle. Even stoic Mr. Wallace, a retired judge, confessed that Patricia once threatened legal action over the color of his mailbox. At first, Nathan just listened. But something inside him began to change. He realized that what happened to Amelia wasn't an isolated abuse of power. It was a pattern, one rooted in fear, control, and unchecked authority. One evening, as Amelia rested in her study, Nathan sat beside her with a stack of notes. "I thought this would all go away once you exposed her," he said. "But it's bigger than her, isn't it?" Amelia looked up from her laptop. "It always was. That ramp just made people see it." She paused, then added gently, "You've become their voice, you know." Nathan blinked. "Me? You stood in front of a bulldozer." She smiled. "That makes you more than a little brother. That makes you accountable." And so, he leaned in. He joined forces with Amelia's legal team to help gather testimonies from other residents. He created a secure online form for neighbors to anonymously report past HOA abuses. And when he read stories from all over California, similar patterns of discrimination, shady fines, and rulebook manipulation, he knew what had to happen next. "We can't just fix our street," he said at a town hall packed to the walls. "We have to fix the system." The crowd, once wary, now buzzed with energy. Nathan proposed a new HOA model, rotating leadership with term limits, financial transparency dashboards, disability, access oversight committee, and most importantly, an ombudsman, an independent resident advocate with legal insight. The audience erupted in applause. Even the HOA board members who hadn't fled under Patricia's rule began to nod. That night, Amelia rolled up beside Nathan as they watched the sunset behind the hills of Willow Springs. "You did good," she said. Nathan shrugged. "I just followed your example." "No," she replied. "You became the example." And for the first time, Nathan realized this wasn't just about rebuilding a ramp. It was about rebuilding trust. 1 week after the ramp demolition debacle, Willow Springs wasn't just a neighborhood in recovery. It had become a beacon of change. It began with a simple flyer, Nathan Carter taped to the community bulletin board. "What if our HOA worked for us?" By that weekend, more than 70 neighbors had shown up at the clubhouse, many of them for the first time ever. Gone were the days of quiet compliance and whispered complaints. People were ready to speak and to listen. Nathan opened the meeting with a message not of anger, but of collaboration. "We were told for years that rules were rules, But what if the rules were wrong? Or worse, used to silence people instead of support them? He then introduced a proposed new charter, a resident-led, term-limited, fully transparent HOA system, with policies rooted in equity, respect, and real-world needs. But the biggest proposal? The Willow Springs Equity and Access Initiative, a plan to offer free modification permits for accessibility improvements, allocate funds from HOA dues, to help low-income and elderly residents with home repairs, launch a neighborhood inclusion council representing all backgrounds, languages, and abilities, and install a direct hotline to a legal advocate for residents facing unfair board action. It was ambitious, bold, maybe even idealistic. But that night, as neighbors debated, brainstormed, and voted, it passed. With support from Amelia's state office, Nathan helped register Willow Springs as a pilot community under California's new Right-to-Home Accessibility Statute, an initiative inspired directly by their own experience. Suddenly, other neighborhoods were calling. HOAs from nearby towns wanted to learn more. A small city in Northern California even asked Nathan to speak at their Housing Equity Summit. But for Nathan, it wasn't about the headlines. It was about what he saw on the ground. Mrs. Patel finally hanging her prayer flags again, this time with the blessing of the board. Mr. Chiat reinstalling his children's playset, now with the help of half the neighborhood. Even the Johnsons, a reserved couple who had never attended a single meeting, showed up to plant a raised garden bed beside the clubhouse ramp. And the ramp, it was rebuilt. Stronger, wider, safer. This time, the entire neighborhood pitched in. A local artist painted it with vibrant floral murals. At night, solar lights lit up the edges in a soft, peaceful glow. Children played on it. Adults gathered around it. It wasn't just an accommodation anymore. It was a symbol. One neighbor said it best during a community BBQ. "We thought we were just rebuilding a ramp. Turns out, we were rebuilding each other." Nathan looked out over the faces he used to only nod at in passing, now united in laughter, sharing food and stories beneath string lights and stars. He smiled, knowing that out of destruction had come something far more powerful. Opportunity. Before the ramp was bulldozed, Nathan Carter had lived a quiet life. He was the guy who paid HOA fees on time, waved politely, fixed things around the house, and supported his sister Amelia through her recovery. He had no ambitions to lead, to organize, or to challenge authority. But chaos has a way of showing us who we really are. And in the rubble of that ramp, Nathan found something he didn't know he had. A calling. What began as a fight for his sister's dignity had transformed into a mission. For his neighbors, his community, and eventually, for people far beyond Willow Springs. At first, the attention overwhelmed him. Interviews, emails, public forums, HOA reform groups all asking for his advice. But Amelia pulled him aside one night, watching him review spreadsheets and community surveys at the kitchen table. "You're not fighting anymore," she said. "You're building now." And she was right. Nathan had gone from reaction to vision. His growth wasn't just visible in public speaking or policy drafts. It was in how he carried himself. The quiet younger brother, who once watched from the sidelines, now walked into town halls with confidence, clarity, and purpose. He wasn't fueled by anger. He was powered by justice. He spent his days working with other HOAs across the state, helping them audit their policies, design inclusive governance models, and prevent the kind of abuse Patricia Lang had carried out unchecked for years. At home, he established a resident mediation council where disputes were handled with empathy instead of threats. He helped create a translation program for non-English-speaking residents to fully understand their rights. And he mentored teens interested in community leadership, one of whom was already planning a campaign for youth representative on the new HOA board. Even more telling, he began listening more than talking, because leadership, he realized, wasn't about being the loudest. It was about amplifying others. During one evening workshop at the newly transformed community center, Nathan sat beside a nervous elderly man who was hesitant to speak up. When Nathan gently asked if he had something to say, the man shared how Patricia had fined him for wheelchair ramp noise, and how he had felt powerless for years. Nathan didn't offer pity. He offered a microphone, and as that man's story echoed through the room, a dozen more hands slowly raised. In that moment, Nathan understood something deeper than policy. Power is meant to be shared. He no longer looked at the ramp as a structure or the HOA as a battlefield. He saw them both as tools, ways to elevate people, protect their dignity, and heal a broken system. And he knew one thing with certainty. He had found his voice, not to shout over others, but to make space for everyone else to speak. A year after the ramp was torn down, Willow Springs was almost unrecognizable, but not because of construction or design. The change was deeper, quieter, and far more profound. It was in the tone of conversations on front lawns, in the laughter of children playing in driveways without fear of violation notices, in the neighbors who waved and stopped to ask, "How can I help?" rather than, "Did you get fined too?" And it was in the man who once stood in silence behind his powerful sister, now standing confidently beside her, not in her shadow, but as a partner in change. Nathan Carter didn't set out to lead a movement, but sometimes leadership doesn't begin with ambition. It begins with a refusal to accept injustice. Under Nathan's direction, Willow Springs became a model for inclusive, resident-led governance. The new HOA board, diverse in age, background, ability, and language, made decisions with the community, not above it. They even renamed themselves the Willow Springs Neighborhood Alliance. The ramp tee that once divided the neighborhood had become a local landmark. Visitors came to see the mural that now covered its sides, a cascade of painted hands, big and small, all colors, all reaching up together. That image had become the new symbol of the community. Not perfection, but participation. And when news broke that Governor Amelia Carter's proposed Right to Home Accessibility Act had passed with bipartisan support, it was Nathan who stood at her side during the press conference. Amelia turned to the crowd of cameras, then to her brother. "This began on our front lawn," she said, her voice steady. "But what happened here has reminded us all. Change doesn't come from titles. It comes from action, from people like Nathan." Nathan cleared his throat. He wasn't a politician. He wasn't used to spotlights. But what he said would be quoted for months. "We thought we were fighting over a ramp," he said, "but we were fighting for something much bigger. The right to exist in our own neighborhoods with dignity, without fear, and with a voice that matters." The crowd erupted. Later that evening, back at home, Nathan and Amelia hosted a barbecue under the string lights that lined the community pavilion, built where the old violations office once stood. Mr. Chen was grilling. Mrs. Patel had brought her famous mango chutney, Teenagers passed out lemonade. Even the new family that had moved into Patricia Lang's old house joined in, their wheelchair ramp proudly installed out front. Nobody complained. In fact, 5 neighbors had helped them build it. Nathan stood back, watching it all. The chaos, the fight, the fear, it had all led to this. A rebuilt community, not one without conflict, but one with compassion. And that's the thing about ramps. They're not just for access. Sometimes they lead us exactly where we were meant to go. Sometimes the biggest change begins with the smallest act of courage, standing your ground when it would be easier to give in. Nathan Carter never planned to become a leader. He just wanted his sister to have safe access to her home. But when a broken system threatened that simple need, he chose not to back down. His journey shows us that real power doesn't come from titles, HOA rulebooks, or loud voices. It comes from quiet persistence, from truth, from compassion. One ramp became a symbol for something far greater, the right to live with dignity, regardless of ability, income, or status. Nathan didn't just rebuild concrete. He rebuilt trust, connection, and hope. And in doing so, he reminded us all, leadership is not about control. It's about care. Justice isn't just legal. It's deeply human. And the smallest voice, when backed by community, can echo farther than any gavel. If you or someone you know is facing unfair treatment from a homeowners association, HOA, document everything. Photos, notices, violations. Know your rights. HOAs are not above federal protections, like the Americans with Disabilities Act or state housing laws. Start small. Join or attend HOA meetings. Review bylaws carefully. Gather allies quietly. Others may feel the same, but stay silent. If needed, seek legal help. Many disability rights organizations offer free consultations. And don't underestimate the power of public pressure. Social media, local news, and community awareness can shift outcomes faster than you think. The ramp in Nathan's story was just the beginning. Your neighborhood could be next.